Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Feeling Full and Finally Free, a caregiver's healing journey. I'm Jeanette Yates, and today I'm going to share a personal story about the vacation I just went on. I want to talk about how I was actually able to relax on this vacation and be present with my family, even in the midst of my mom being rushed to the hospital the day I left. I'm going to talk about how the consistent boundaries I've built up to this point, the mindfulness practice that I have, and my use of positive self talk helped me to enjoy my time away, even when things could potentially get stressful. And I'll also be going a little bit deeper this week and discussing how all of these things helped me even more than I could have imagined. I'm going to discuss how I practiced intuitive self care, including eating and sleeping well, and how all of that contributed to a more memorable vacation for me and with my son, and gave me a new perspective and feeling of freedom and joy. And I'm sharing all of this with you because I believe the same is possible for you. And I want you to believe it too. Okay, so let me set the stage here for this vacation with my son in the first place. So I had been trying desperately to plan a vacation with my recent high school graduate son and my in college son and my husband this summer, knowing that this might be one of the last times that we can all manage to get our schedules together. But it turns out we were having a really hard time doing that. Even as the summer went on, I could just not find the right times, days, all of that stuff where it met my husband's schedule, my son, and my son's schedule. So I was really kind of, getting ready to throw in the towel on trying to have a vacation with my family this summer. And so I was, still trying to figure that out, but really, it was starting to be obvious that it wasn't going to happen. And then my mom was actually a few weeks ago taken to the hospital. And so while she was there, of course, I was with her there sometimes too. And while I was there one day, she became increasingly her condition deteriorated. They determined that she was becoming septic. They needed to do an emergency surgery to try to clear the infection. And a lot of stuff was happening really quickly. I was making a lot of hard decisions. And I recently did a podcast episode about how I made those decisions in that time, and how my boundary setting helped me to do that as well. So I will link that in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to that. But in the middle of all of that, in the middle of making decisions for my mom's care, trying to figure out what I needed to do for myself, who I needed to notify for my family, things like that. My husband called and asked if there was anything he could do. And I don't know what to say other than to just tell you that in that moment, I had this great sense of, I just want to spend time with my son. And while I want to spend time with both of my sons and my husband, I had this sense that I really wanted to spend time with my son who recently graduated. So, of all the things I could have asked my husband to do to help me during this time, when my mom was in emergency surgery, what I said to him was, please talk to our son and try to figure out a way that he and I could go do something together, go on a little vacation. Can you please just figure that out for me? And by the time I got home that night, my husband and son had come up with the vacation plan, which was what we did last week. And so I don't know what to tell you about, like, well, how did you know you were going to be able to go and all that kind of stuff. I just had that deep inner sense, and I could really feel that strong pull to spend time with my son. That's what my intuition, my heart was telling me. And so that's what I asked my husband to do. He and my son planned something for us to do, and we did that last week. Now, in the midst of all that, I know, of course, my mom she's coming out of surgery. She's going to be in the healing process. She's going to go back to the nursing home, all of these kind of things. And I had to know, which is the first thing we're going to talk about today as far as practical. I had to know that I could leave town no matter what was going on with her. And that was something that didn't just happen that day. It is something that I have baked in to my caregiving practice over the last several years. This idea of knowing that though my presence is often needed and almost always helpful and um, wanted by my mom, there are other people who need me. There are other people I need in my life. And to develop and continue relationships with those people is very important. So that's something that I have worked on in my own life day to day over the last several years, trying to find that balance in caregiving for my mom and also tending to my family, my needs, my community, my other relationships. And so um, I have also done a few other things to set things up so that I feel more comfortable leaving, uh, even if an emergency is going to happen. So she is in a nursing home now instead of being home by herself, essentially. She has 24-hour care and access to emergency care pretty immediately. And so, whether she was still going to be in the hospital when I left or she was going to be back in the nursing home, I knew that she would be covered if something happened and that people could get in touch with me. So that's part of one of the things that I've done that, is if you're struggling to figure out how you can get away, I'm not saying put your loved one in a nursing home. However, I would advocate for you thinking about how much care is needed on a daily basis. So in my mom's case, she did need 24-hour care on a daily basis. Now, maybe your loved one isn't into that position. Um, and so maybe that's not something that's needed 24/7, 365 days. But there are facilities that do offer respite care where you can, and I know people who have used this, where it's like it's a place for your loved one to go where they will get 24-hour care, they will get their meals and things like that while you're on your vacation. And so you don't have to do it permanently. It can be a respite care kind of situation. So if something like that is interesting to you, I would reach out to your local facilities, check with your Medicare um, insurance or any other insurances you have, and look at those options there as well. And of course, there's always, if your funds allow it, um, people that can come in home for 24 hours as well. But finding a situation or a circumstance that works for you so that you know that when you're not there, there is coverage, there is that um, surrounding protection for your loved one, and access to 24-hour care is something that I have done, and it has made my day-to-day life much easier and, allowed me to breathe so that I can even think about some of these other things like actually going on vacation and enjoying it, which is what we're going to get to later. It's one thing to go on the vacation, it's a whole other thing to actually enjoy it. So, now, another thing, and I talked about this in the last episode where I talked about, making those tough decisions. We talk a lot on this podcast and in my program and when I work with caregivers about boundary setting before I left. So, my mom, we plan the vacation. I tell my mom, listen, I'm going to be out of town from this date to this date. Um, I will communicate with you. We can text, we can chit chat on the phone, but I'll be doing this, and then I actually sandwiched 2 trips back to back. So I did 4 days with my son and then another 3 days at a family wedding. So I basically was, on the road for 7 days. And so I needed my mom to know that ahead of time to set her expectations. I also let some of her other, our friends and family members know, hey, I'm going to be gone. This is what I'm doing. I let the facility know. where she lives. And so there was this understanding, I was going to be gone. You have my number if you need me. This is how things go. So I think that's always really important to set those physical, time, and emotional and mental boundaries. So the physical and time boundaries I set, um, and made sure to communicate those. And then that emotional and mental boundary, that is going to be the one that you set in your own mind. My mom is being cared for. She will be okay. If she's not okay, they will call me. I'm available by phone. They will call me if they need me. She has 24/7 care. She knows where I'm going to be. She knows how to get in touch with me, and so does the facility. This is just things that I reminded myself of as I was planning this trip. And I also reminded myself, so it wasn't just about like reminding myself that I wasn't a horrible caregiver for going on vacation, like, and reminding myself of that practical stuff, like they can call you if they need you. They can call you if they need you, which is one thing you do say. But the other thing is, I need this time with my son. I want this time with my son. I want to go celebrate my family member's wedding. These are things that are important to me too. And just because something else is important to you doesn't mean that your loved one is not important to you. Okay. So I think a lot of times we feel like if we are saying, oh, this is so important, I really want to do this, this is important, we're that means that other thing is not important. And that's not true. We can have many important things in our lives, but whatever is the priority for that moment has to be that priority. So you can't have everything as the top priority. And so that is something to remember as well. So reminding yourself, using that positive self-talk to remind you that you have set things up so that your loved one is going to be cared for the best they can. And you also want to do this important thing, that this is also something that you need. This is also something required for your own mental, emotional, relational health, right? And so that is how setting boundaries allows you to feel more secure when you are taking a break, whether it's a one-day staycation or a whole vacation where you're leaving town. These were the things that I set in place. Now, here is where it gets kind of fun, because on the day that I left to go on vacation with my son, we get to the hotel, we have a nice dinner, and then we go to bed, um, and then my phone rings at 2 a.m. that first night, and my mom is going back to the hospital. Now, the old me would have immediately gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour. I would have been fretting, panicking, worrying, going back and forth in my head, what I needed to do, what should I do? If I do this, what happens to that? Blah, 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 blah. But that is not what happened this time. What happened this time was I talked on the phone with a nurse. She made it very clear why they were sending my mom back to the emergency room, back to the hospital. She told me that, this was more of a precautionary thing, all these kind of things. So she gave me enough information so that I could make a decision. And I was able to thank her, get off the phone, text my mom, who was able to text me back. So I knew that like she was okay in that sense. I texted one more person, and then I went to sleep. I went back to sleep because I knew that no decision needed to be made right now. Now, sometimes a decision does have to be made right in that moment, but I was able to get the information I needed to make the decision. And the first decision was get more sleep. And then the second decision that next morning was, okay, now what do we need to do? Okay. So I think whenever we're really nervous about taking a break or doing something like this, and we take the break and then something happens, which it's like I don't want to say a joke in the caregiving space, but if you're a caregiver, you know that as soon as you're quote unavailable, your presence is needed. It's just the way it is. But when we set up these boundaries for ourselves, when we set up these, um, you know, stepping stones, we can step into um, the place we need to make the good decisions. So sometimes you need to go from 0 to 100, change all your plans, rush wherever you need to be. That sometimes happens in caregiving. But a lot of the time, you can make a series of smaller decisions. You can take slower but more purposeful action and not get so distressed. And one of the things that I have done to help me not go from 0 to 100 every single time I get a phone call, because if you've listened to this podcast, you know that's a lot of phone calls for me because my mom is has been pretty sick for a long time. So there's been a lot of phone calls, a lot of 0 to 60 my whole, or 0 to 100 my whole life, right? But I have learned to practice mindfulness on a regular basis, which even means that when I get woken up at 2 a.m., I'm obviously not practicing mindfulness. I was sound asleep. My body knows how to gather itself. I have practiced mindfulness enough that I know my body knows to breathe. My body knows to check in with the moment right then. My body knows to stop thinking about what I didn't do and stop thinking about what I may need to do later and just focus on the moment, which means I'm able to get the information I need to make the decision when I need to make it. Now, I love a good guided meditation. I'm a huge fan. But for me, it's been the mindfulness practice of mindfulness of breathing that has been the most transformative for me. So, mindfulness of breath is very simple. It is all about breathing and knowing that you are breathing. And by doing that, you are automatically staying in the moment. And it is as simple as that. So I have a couple of mindfulness resources. I'm going to put them in the show notes so that you can understand more about what mindfulness is and mindfulness of breath is specifically. And then another mindfulness activity is called choiceless awareness, where you just pay attention to the things in your immediate awareness. But for situations like what I'm talking about here, especially when you don't know that you are going to be needing to practice mindfulness until the phone rings, you can use this this breathing and knowing that you're breathing, this mindfulness of breath. This has helped me reduce worry. Like I said, I don't think about what happened before. I don't think about what happens later. I'm just present in the moment. That allowed me to get more rest that night so that I could make appropriate decisions when the time came. It is also something that I found. I was just at the wedding that I was at this weekend. I was telling someone how when I practice mindfulness intentionally, that mindfulness of breath, one of the things it does, so I will do that intentionally, like in the mornings, for example. But what it does is throughout my days, I find myself being more mindful. And that helps me reduce my overall, that undercurrent of stress that we have, even when like everything is fine, we still feel all keyed up. It has reduced that a lot. So I just highly recommend mindfulness of breath. And again, like I said, please check the show notes for some resources for that. I will add them there. Another thing that is very, very helpful to me is something I practiced more intentionally before, and now it's kind of just become more of my inner dialogue. So if you're like me, you may have an inner dialogue that's not always very nice. Okay. You may have um, that inner dialogue that tells you that you're not doing enough, you're selfish, you know, what kind of person are you that you would leave your mother this way? All these kind of conversations. You owe your mother this. There's all these kind of things that we tell ourselves. Well, that used to be like my whole entire brain all the time, whether it was about my mom or my parenting or my marriage or my body. I was always speaking harsh words to myself. Um, and that gets you absolutely nowhere other than more stressed out and more burned out. So several years ago, I started using positive self-talk. Some people say affirmations. There's a whole like, is it an affirmation? Is it not an affirmation? What makes a good affirmation? I won't get all into that this time. That's for a whole other episode. But I will tell you just that using, not lying to yourself. We don't need to just make some stuff up, right? But we can tell ourselves the truth, and we can combat guilt and worry by using positive self talk. So we can tell ourselves that we are worthy of the same care that we give others. We can remind ourselves that our loved one is in good hands, that they are being tended to. And we can remind ourselves that it is important for us to take care of our own lives because we have lives to live, right? And that ultimately we are honoring our parents, we are respecting our parents by living the life that they want for us. Because whether or not your parent always acts like they want you to have a life, they really do. Okay. Most parents really do want you to enjoy your life, enjoy your children, enjoy your relationships with your friends, enjoy your relationships with your partners. They want that, even if sometimes they um, act like they don't. Okay. Um, and so reminding yourself of these things. Sometimes people use scriptures or quotes from famous authors that they enjoy as positive self talk. So if you don't have it in you yet to create your own positive self talk statements, well, I have a little worksheet for you that you can use. So you could, again, check the show notes. I'm going to have a lot of resources in the show notes this week. Check the show notes for that. Um, I'm happy to share some of those with you. But then, like I said, if there's some other words from scripture or an author that you enjoy, you can use those things as well to get some positive reinforcement in your brain. And then the last thing I want to talk about is kind of this side effect that happened on the trip for me. And so, uh, again, for me, being a caregiver is has been a huge part of my life. But another part of my life that I have had to overcome. So, overcoming caregiver burnout has been big, but also I've had to overcome um, issues with my body image and with food and things like that. And so, going on vacation, even when I wasn't stressed out about my mom, because maybe she was doing better at the time, I used to get really stressed out about how I was going to work out, when I was going to eat, what I was going to eat, all of these kind of things, really holding on to all of those. Uh, some people might say they were healthy routines. In my case, they were not healthy routines, even though they may have looked like it on the outside. And so, over time, I have worked to let go of some of those obsessive behaviors in my eating and in my workouts. And so, another thing that has happened in my life, but it was really present for me as I was on vacation because it was putting me into one of those situations that I have less control over, you know, all of the things that I do when I'm home, was that I noticed that all of this mindfulness, all of this positive self talk, all of these things that I have set up to be able to be there in the moment with my son, when I thought about why I was there, to spend time with him, to cultivate a memory or a series of memories, then all of my stress and worry about my food and my workouts dissipated. They just were not there. And so I went through this whole entire week being able to listen to what my body wanted and needed. I was able to eat with a more open and intuitive sense of what I wanted and needed. And intuitive eating isn't just about like eat when you're hungry, stop when you're not hungry. It's more about, really listening to cues in your body instead of the cues of the world or the rules of the world, right? And so I was able to do that. I was able to move my body when I wanted to and felt like it, and rest when it was tired. And believe me, it was tired because it was a busy week. But what happened to me by doing these things was it was just one other layer of that worry and that stress that went away. And so I know a lot of us as caregivers, we're on vacation. When we actually get to vacation, if we can actually not worry about our loved one, we still have sometimes these other things. Now, in my case, it was food and workout. Maybe for you, it's something different, but we have all of these worries. But the more we can practice mindfulness, the more we can practice intuitive self care, listening to what our bodies want and need, whether it's food, movement, rest, water, a hug from a family member. All of these things will help us feel that joy that we all are, we all wish that we could experience. We all are craving. We want that. I have said it plenty of times, and I hear it from caregivers all the time. I want my life back. Well, the way to get it back is by doing all of these things, practicing all of this, setting the boundaries, managing your expectations, practicing mindfulness, practicing positive self-talk, and then actually being the moments and experiencing things through where you are in the moment, and not through all of these other lenses of, are you a good enough caregiver? Are you a good enough parent? Are you a good enough person? But experiencing them as you are right now, which is a person who is worthy of this moment that you want in your life. You are worthy of vacation. You are worthy of respite. You are worthy of the same care that you give others. And so I hope this has helped you, inspired you, um, in taking the time you need to do the work that is required to get the life that you want. And it is possible. You can do it. Remember that if you need help as a caregiver, even if you don't see that there's help there, ask for it anyway. Okay? Ask from the professionals, ask your friends, ask for help. One of the biggest things that keeps us from getting help is not saying that we need it. We have to admit that we need it. We have to ask for it. And then also remember that setting boundaries, practicing mindfulness, using positive self-talk, and then using and listening to yourself. So you're practicing mindfulness so that you can tap into yourself. You're using positive self-talk because once you tap in there, you may notice like, I'm not talking very nice to myself. So we're going to practice mindfulness, tapping into ourselves, being present. We're going to use positive self-talk, switching that narrative. And then once we believe that we deserve the care that we give others, then we can start practicing that self-care. And so I hope all of this has been an encouragement to you today, to prioritize your self-care and well-being. I am so excited that you joined me for this episode today. I'm very appreciative of your time. I hope that my story inspires you to set boundaries, practice mindfulness, and use positive self-talk so that you can enjoy your either staycations or vacations or even afternoons off. Remember, taking time to yourself is essential. It's not an option. It allows you to be a better caregiver in the long run, but it also gets you unstuck from that cycle of burnout and guilt so that you can enjoy your life beyond caregiving, your life outside of caregiving. Now, if you are looking for some help on boundaries, I will link in the show notes my Say No and Mean It Without Being Mean workshop. And that's where you can learn more about communicating boundaries with compassion and confidence. I'm also going to add the mindfulness resources and also your positive self talk worksheet. And then there might even be another little surprise resource in there for you. Go ahead and check it out. Um, in not only this episode show notes, but in all the show notes before, you will see additional resources and support. And please like, subscribe, and follow. Stay tuned for more episodes. Take care, and remember, you deserve to live a life filled with joy, fulfillment, healthy boundaries, and that life beyond caregiving. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.